Welcome to the deep dive. If you are listening to this right now, learner, we have a genuinely fascinating mission tailored specifically for you today.
We really do.
Yeah, we are pulling apart a profound philosophical work titled Thus Spoke Confucius. It's by the philosopher Abdul Jabbar Al-Waily, and we are zeroing in on a single, really dense chapter focused entirely on the concept of upbringing.
And it is a remarkable piece of writing. What stands out immediately is that despite the title's nod to ancient Eastern philosophy, Al-Waily's approach is intensely pragmatic.
Right, he's not just dealing in abstract, unreachable ideals here.
Exactly. He is laying out a mechanical, step-by-step blueprint for how environments construct human behavior. It starts right at the kitchen table and expands all the way out to the structure of global civilization.
Okay, let's unpack this, because it is so much more than a parenting manual. It's really an architecture for human happiness.
That's a great way to put it.
Whether you, the learner, are trying to understand the invisible forces driving societal shifts, or looking for a practical framework for your own daily routine, or just wondering why some of history's wealthiest philosophers were so incredibly miserable, there's something in this analysis that you can apply directly to your life today.
So we should probably start at the foundation.
Let's do it. Al-Waily introduces the premise that any functioning society balances on three distinct pillars: the home, the school, and the street.
And right away, he addresses the classic nature versus nurture debate.
Yeah.
He concedes that genetics matter, of course they do, but he positions the environment as the ultimate multiplier.
It's a multiplier.
Yes. If you have someone with wonderful innate qualities, a healthy environment will elevate them to their highest potential. But a toxic environment will dismantle those same good qualities entirely. The environment always wins the war of attrition.
He gets incredibly specific about generational influence here, which I actually found pretty surprising. We often talk about coming from good stock or having a good family.
Sure.
But Al-Waily argues that the goodness of grandparents doesn't actually guarantee the goodness of the grandchildren. It skips.
Right. It skips unless the immediate parents are also good. The day-to-day home environment acts as the absolute bottleneck for virtue.
A bottleneck.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You could have generations of upstanding, ethical ancestors, but if the current parents fail to create a solid, disciplined foundation in the home, that historical goodness essentially evaporates. The child only experiences the immediate reality, not the historical legacy.
Man, that puts a massive amount of pressure on the present moment.
It really does.
But let's move outside the home to that third pillar he mentions, the street.
Ah, yes.
In his framework, the street means public spaces, cafes, clubs, cinemas, and if we modernize it today, probably the internet and social media. Al-Waily argues that the street requires sensible government monitoring to prevent societal harm.
He does.
But hang on, I have to push back here a little bit. When anyone says the government needs to monitor public spaces for societal good, who decides what sensible actually is? That sounds like a very quick, slippery slope into censorship.
It is a delicate boundary, and to be fair, Al-Waily is acutely aware of that friction. He insists this monitoring must be done without crossing into the restriction of healthy, normal freedoms.
Okay, but how do we establish those boundaries without becoming authoritarian?
Well, this brings us to a critical warning from his work. What's fascinating here is his view on how we usually set those boundaries. He insists that we cannot simply improvise what is good or bad for society based on our casual habits.
Big improvisation trap.
Exactly. Human beings are creatures of habit. We get used to certain behaviors in public spaces, and we begin to confuse the word familiar with the word good.
Wow. We just assume our default way of living, whatever we grew up with, is the correct way to organize a society.
Right, and that is the danger of improvisation. So his solution to that exact slippery slope you mentioned is that we have to consult specialists.
Specialists like who?
Psychologists, sociologists, health experts, religious and ethical scholars, they all need to work in tandem. You cannot wing it when it comes to social architecture, and you absolutely cannot leave it solely to politicians. There has to be an objective standard.
And his ultimate standard for evaluating what is good and bad actually bypasses ideology entirely, which is refreshing. It all comes down to the results.
Pure results.
He defines the ultimate good as public and private benefits that do not conflict with each other. This is his standardized criterion for ridding society of social chaos.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it acts as a brilliant safeguard against both extremes of the political spectrum.
How so?
Well, if a policy benefits the massive public collective but completely destroys private individual happiness, it fails his test.
Right.
Conversely, if an individual pursues private joy in a way that pollutes or damages the public good, that also fails. The synergy between the private and the public is the only sustainable path to stability.
And understanding that private happiness leads us directly into his deep dive on the home. This might be the most striking mathematical claim in the whole book.
The three-quarters rule.
Yes. He states that whoever loses the comfort of their home loses 3/4 of their happiness. 3/4.
It's a bold claim.
It is. And he defines a happy home as having absolutely nothing to do with expensive furniture, sheer square footage, or wealth. Happiness and misery are entirely internal states.
The physical building is largely irrelevant. The psychological architecture is what dictates that three-quarters of your joy.
So how do we build that psychological architecture?
He breaks down a very specific triad. 3 Arabic concepts that act as keys for achieving true happiness at home. The first is tadbir, which translates to wise management.
Let's ground that for the learner. What does tadbir actually look like in a modern household?
It is the literal, disciplined running of a life. It's budgeting your finances so you aren't crippled by debt. It's managing a schedule so you aren't constantly panicked and running late.
Basic logistics.
Meal planning, basic hygiene, exactly. Al-Waily describes tadbir as a fortress against ignorance, disease, and poverty. If you don't manage the mundane logistics of your home, chaos seeps in and happiness becomes impossible.
Okay, so tadbir is the foundation. You have to run the ship. The second key he introduces is samaha, which translates to generous tolerance.
Yes, because you can have a perfectly managed, meticulously budgeted household, but if you lack grace for the people living in it, it's just a sterile prison.
A perfectly organized prison.
Right. Samaha is the ability to forgive a spouse for a mundane mistake, or let go of the annoyance when a roommate leaves a dish in the sink. It is the social lubricant that prevents a household from fracturing under the weight of human imperfection.
Which brings us to the third key, kana, or wise contentment. Now, I want to really zoom in on this, learner, because Al-Waily gives this a very specific definition that completely flips how modern culture usually frames contentment.
It really does.
He does not view it as passive acceptance. It is not sitting back on the couch and saying, well, it is what it is. He defines true contentment as being satisfied with what you have only after making all possible effort to improve your situation.
That is a vital distinction. It prevents contentment from mutating into a convenient excuse for laziness.
You have to put in the work first.
You have to sweat, you have to try to fix the leak, get the better job, or repair the relationship. Then and only then, whatever the ultimate result is, you accept it with grace.
He argues that schools must partner with the home to actively teach these 3 traits: management, tolerance, and contentment.
And if homes and schools actually manage to instill these virtues, the society naturally begins to encourage good people and suffocate bad behavior.
He uses this incredibly vivid visual analogy here.
The owl.
Yes. He says that in a society built on these pillars, bad actors won't be able to thrive out in the open. They will be forced to hide away like an owl hiding from the lights.
It's a perfect image. The environment itself becomes hostile to corruption. A person acting selfishly in a society of generous tolerance will feel entirely isolated.
They stick out like a sore thumb.
Exactly. The social ecosystem will force them to either genuinely reform their behavior or at the very least fake it just to fit in. The light of the society forces the owl into the shadows.
To build that kind of illuminated society, Al-Waily lays out what he considers the 10 Commandments for both the young and the old.
It's quite a list.
It is a heavy list of core virtues: faith, patriotism, obedience to parents, benefiting others, maintaining a clean heart, truthfulness, contentment, knowledge, patience, and work. I'll be honest, looking at that list, a few of them feel a bit rigid to a modern ear.
Which ones?
Obedience to parents, for example. What if your parents are objectively terrible guides?
It's a fair question, and he does acknowledge that exceptions exist, but he operates on statistical majorities. He argues that the exception doesn't break the general rule.
So the rule stands for the majority.
Yes. Obedience to parents is urged not out of blind, archaic tradition, but because, logically, parents are generally the most sincere and experienced guides a person has. They have a vested biological and social interest in your success that a stranger simply does not.
That makes sense. He also frames the virtue of benefiting others in a way that almost feels selfish, but in a highly functional way.
Transactional morality.
Exactly. He doesn't just say, be nice because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
He says, you help people because people don't forget those who help them. The good inevitably returns to the doer.
It is highly functional. He isn't interested in a morality that only exists in theory. He wants a morality that sustains a civilization. And this raises an important question about the modern world, specifically regarding how we view our own advancement.
Here's where it gets really interesting. He issues this stark, almost chilling warning about the illusion of civilization. He writes that morals without civilization are fake, but a civilization without morals is bestial and destructive.
It's a powerful statement.
Think about that for a second. We have smartphones, artificial intelligence, global supply chains, massive technological civilization. But Al-Waily suggests that without high morals to anchor all of that infrastructure, we aren't enlightened. We are just highly efficient beasts.
It is a devastating diagnosis of the modern condition. We constantly equate technological advancement with moral superiority. We assume because we have better medicine and faster computers, we are inherently better people.
But he entirely severs that connection.
He does. He argues that high morals are desperately needed in a high-tech age, specifically to protect basic human rights, lives, and freedoms from the very machines and systems we've built.
But he doesn't just point fingers at a lack of morals. He connects this demand for personal morality directly to systemic physical reality. And this is where his pragmatism really shines.
Right, the parallel reform.
Yes, he states that social reform must happen parallel to economic, agricultural, and industrial reform.
Yeah.
Why? Because you cannot logically expect high morality from someone whose family is starving to death.
Precisely. Extreme poverty and systemic injustice drive human beings to break laws and abandon their deepest held beliefs simply to survive.
Survival overrides theory.
Always. You cannot lecture a freezing person about the virtues of a clean heart and generous tolerance. You have to give them a coat first.
To that end, he provides a direct, four-part formula to eliminate societal hardships. It sounds simple, but unpacking it reveals how monumental a task it is.
Let's hear it.
Here is his formula. Eliminate ignorance with knowledge. Eliminate sickness with medicine. Eliminate fear with safety. And eliminate unemployment with work.
And those four pillars are entirely interlocking. You cannot eliminate fear if sickness is rampant. You cannot eliminate ignorance if people are unemployed and starving.
They all lean on each other.
They do. What is vital here is how he balances physical reality with the mindset we discussed earlier. Yes, happiness is fundamentally a psychological state, the three-quarters rule. However, he acknowledges that very few resolute people possess the mental fortitude to detach their psychological state from a harsh, punishing physical reality.
So for the vast majority of us, fixing the physical world, building hospitals, creating stable jobs, ensuring actual physical security on the streets is absolutely mandatory for our mental well-being.
It is the baseline.
Without basic safety, creators cannot create. Humans simply cannot enjoy art, philosophy, or science if they are constantly looking over their shoulders in fear.
It requires a baseline of survival. And this concept of the absolute necessity of work and engagement brings us to a highly memorable anecdote in the text regarding the famous German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer.
Oh, I love this part. Schopenhauer is legendary for his intense, almost suffocating pessimism.
The quintessential pessimist.
He basically built a legacy on the idea that human existence is a mistake. But Al-Waily diagnoses this pessimism not as some high-level philosophical awakening, but as a direct biological result of Schopenhauer's environment.
Right.
He points out that Schopenhauer inherited a massive amount of wealth from his family and therefore never actually had to work a day in his life.
He views idle time not as a luxury, but as a severe psychological hazard. Because Schopenhauer lacked mandatory, engaging work to occupy his hands and his intellect, his mind was left completely vulnerable to melancholy.
He was too bored for his own good.
Basically. Without a problem to solve or a task to complete, his intellect turned inward and began listening to the negative whispers of his own mind.
It's the old saying, idle hands are the devil's workshop, but elevated to a clinical, philosophical level. Engaging work is presented as the ultimate shield against dark thoughts.
It's a shield.
When you are busy building something, solving a complex problem at your job, or actively helping your community, you simply do not have the mental real estate to fall into existential despair. Work isn't just a way to pay the bills, it is a psychological requirement for a healthy human brain.
Which brings us to his final overarching theme. The absolute supremacy of the intellect over improvisation, and the danger of what he calls the death of the conscience.
This really ties everything together.
It does. He issues a strong plea to always consult the mind, avoid rushing, avoid improvising major life decisions.
Because when we rush, we allow our unchecked emotions to take the wheel. And he points out that even wildly positive emotions can lead to disastrous decisions if they bypass the intellect.
Emotions are fleeting and reactive. The intellect is steady and calculating.
He offers a deeply comforting perspective on the safety of calculation, too.
The two rewards concept.
Yes. He argues that if you sit down and calculate a decision from every possible angle using your pure intellect, errors become rare exceptions rather than the rule. And he shares this profound quote: "The one who strives and is right has two rewards. The one who strives and is wrong has one reward."
It completely reframes failure.
It does. If you truly apply your mind, do the research, and try your best, you are entirely blameless, even if the outcome is a failure. You get the reward of the effort itself, and you walk away with a learned lesson. It removes that paralyzing fear of failure.
Provided that the failure came from calculated intellectual effort rather than careless emotional improvisation. And this discussion of unchecked emotions leads to his metaphorical view of Satan, or the devil.
This is a really interesting reframing.
He doesn't describe this as a literal entity with pitchforks wandering the earth. He uses it as a powerful symbol for the death of the conscience.
He references a saying that the devil flows in humans like blood in the veins. He uses this biology metaphor to illustrate just how easily unchecked emotional whispers, anger, jealousy, sudden greed, can completely bypass our rational intellect if we aren't vigilantly careful.
It bypasses the mind entirely.
It's a constant daily internal battle between the deliberate slow intellect and the rushing blood of raw emotion.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the devil in his framework is simply the urge to improvise when we should plan. It is the urge to pursue private gain at the expense of public harm.
The easy way out.
Exactly. Conscience is defined as the active application of the intellect to moral problems. When we stop thinking and start simply reacting to our environment, the conscience dies.
So, what does this all mean for you, learner? We've covered a massive amount of ground today. From the generational bottleneck of the home to the interlocking formula of eliminating societal hardship to the absolute necessity of work to fend off the Schopenhauer trap of idle melancholy.
It all connects.
Ultimately, Al-Waily is telling us that true well-being is an active, relentless collaboration. We have to shape our external environment, manage our homes, demand safe streets, engage in meaningful work so that the environment can, in turn, shape us into better people.
It is a dynamic equilibrium. But as we wrap up this exploration of Thus Spoke Confucius, I want to leave you with a final thought to turn over in your own mind. Something that steps slightly outside of Al-Waily's framework and into our modern reality.
I love these.
We discussed his definition of wise contentment, the idea that you can only be content after you have exerted all possible effort to change your situation. He also insists that unchecked emotion is the death of the conscience, and that the intellect must rigidly rule over our feelings.
All right. Total intellectual dominance over our reactive emotions.
But think about modern psychology and today's therapy culture. We are constantly taught to validate our feelings, to sit with our emotions, and to accept ourselves exactly as we are without needing to constantly strive or fix things.
That's the dominant message today, for sure.
So this raises an important question. Does our modern culture of radical self-acceptance and emotional validation clash fundamentally with Al-Waily's philosophy? Are we prioritizing our emotional comfort over the rigorous intellectual effort he says is required to actually build a moral society?
That is heavy.
Could the modern instinct to just let it go and protect your peace sometimes be the very emotional improvisation that he warns will lead to the death of our collective conscience?
Wow. Are we using the language of modern therapy to avoid the hard intellectual work of actually fixing our environments? That is a massive question to sit with. Learner, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope this exploration gave you some incredibly practical tools for managing your own home, understanding the society around you, and keeping your intellect sharply engaged. Keep questioning, keep learning, and we will catch you next time.